The continuums to manage. Today, we are talking about everyone's favorite buzzword in sales, and that is the word nuance. What you first need to understand is that a sales process is only as good as your ability to manage it and understand what you're optimizing for. Of course, at the end of the day, we all want to optimize for closed deals, to close the most amount of money as ideally easy as possible. But there's tons of different approaches you can take to still get to the same end goal of closing more deals. Right. I think a lot of people have the misconception that it's all black and white, that like there's objective right, there's objective wrong, and there's no gray area in between, because that would be a stupid assumption to make. You really just need to understand what you're optimizing for and reverse engineer a system that is aligned with this approach. And so obviously I'm going to get into a tons of different examples of exactly what I mean. But I think to give a first example, to maybe set expectations of kind of what I mean, we'll just do something that everyone's familiar with, right? The dynamic between optimizing for quantity of leads versus quality of leads. And I'll give more examples of this and maybe like best practices of the approach to take if you decide you're optimizing for one or the other. So quantity of leads, what does that mean? That is, hey, I want to get as many people on the calendar talking to myself or my sales reps as possible. And then on the other side of this continuum is quality of leads, meaning I don't want to speak to someone unless they are my exact ICP and they are already qualified. There's really no right or wrong way to go about this. I can't tell every single person that you should be optimizing for quality or you should be optimizing for quantity. It really just depends where you're at with your business. So for example, if it is like a founder-led sales team, their time is bottlenecked. They're managing different aspects of the business. They're trying to like hire and train people for fulfillment, and they just don't really have the time as of right now to be sifting through the ashes, talking to tons of unqualified people. They're going to optimize for quality. And they want, again, something I'll get into as well is like a funnel that kind of filters people out. They're focusing on quality. You might see someone have, 10 or 15 different qualifying questions in their funnel and saying, do not book this call unless you're ready to start as soon as possible and you make a minimum of $10,000 a month. They're optimizing for a quality of lead. So if that person books through, they know it's worth their time to speak to. On the other side of that, say you're optimizing for quantity. A lot of times when you see this is when someone has a sales team of commission-only sales reps that they really don't care about and really care how much money they make. And so the funnel is basically like, hey, book a call, learn more, get on, see what we do, see how this works, whatever it is. They're just trying to throw as many people on the calendar as possible. Maybe you have a team of SDRs sifting through the ashes to book to closers. And a lot of times they're dealing with like unqualified people, but it doesn't matter. You are optimizing for as many people as possible, speaking to your sales team and learning about your offer. There's really no right or wrong way to go about it. You just have to understand what direction you want to go. If you're optimizing for quality, there's best practices, there's best procedures to do this. If you're trying to optimize for quantity, there's best practices and there's standard operating procedures to go about that in the most efficient manner. And let's talk about what some of those are. For example, if you've watched any of our podcast YouTube videos here in the group, you see me make fun of this idea of the free strategy session quite a bit. And that's because I think it's largely a pretty ridiculous concept that you see a lot of in online sales. And this isn't to say like the words free strategy session suddenly derail the entire sales process. But what it does do is set a little bit of a strange expectation. And so the way this is like conventionally positioned is you have like an ad or a message that kind of like piques vague intrigue. And it's, hey, the call to action is like book a call to learn more and to see how we can help you. And it's like maybe not even super clear that you're selling them something. And then you have someone who agrees to a free strategy session that they think that you're just going to help them strategize with their business, but you have some sales rep ripping NEPQ questions trying to hard close them. Like it's just kind of a very strange dynamic. But what you're optimizing for, again, is quantity, getting people on the calls, having conversation. And then if we end up pitching 100 people, maybe a good percentage of them close. That's what you're optimizing for. And then if you know, anabolic assessment, really, this is kind of the same idea. It's a bit of like a bait and switch. It's like, hey, do this quiz. We'll see what your testosterone levels are or something. And then it's like, oh, your testosterone levels are low. Get on this anabolic assessment. And then we'll like tell you how you can, fix your diet and get healthy again. They don't necessarily know they're being sold a $5,000 coaching program. They just think they're agreeing to an anabolic assessment. What that is optimizing for is book calls on the calendar, people speaking to your sales team, and maybe just putting an offer in front of someone, whether they know it or agree to it or not. On the other side of this continuum, you have a very different optimization, and that is apply to work with us or book this application call. Because what this does is align expectations very well. People are getting on this call. They're agreeing that, hey, I know that there's an offer in front of me. I'm interested in this offer. It's okay that you pitch me and it's okay that you sell me on this. And at the end of the day, both of these work, right? They're both booking calls. Expectations are a little bit different. But again, if you're playing the quantity game, maybe a free strategy session would work. You're just booking, hey, anyone who gets on a call, maybe we can just close a higher amount of these people versus, hey, we're a lean operation. We have a very specific type of person that's a good fit. We want to speak to them. You know, I don't believe in the bait and switch tactics. I just want people who are serious working with me, and I want them on calls. There's no right or wrong way to do it, right? You just have to understand what you're optimizing for. Again, so you can't have a free strategy session or an anabolic assessment on your landing page or your call to action, and then also get annoyed that people have very low intent on calls. That would be a stupid thing to do. You know, so that's why you have to understand what you're optimizing for. If you want a free strategy session, anabolic assessment, you have to expect that expectations aren't going to be aligned. You're going to get a lot of unqualified leads and that's fine if you're playing that game. You just have to understand the game that you're playing. And so if you say apply to work with us application call, you have to understand there is a little bit more friction in that funnel, and you're probably not going to get the same amount of bookings. And so you can't have this, you know, rugged application process and strict call to action saying apply to work with us. You don't book this call if you have less than $10,000 in your bank account or making less than $20,000 a month in your agency. You can't do that and then get upset that not that many people are booking in, you know, because there's a lot of friction there. Understand the game that you're playing. And what's really important to understand, this is kind of what inspired me to make this video, is it's not necessarily like you're either at either end of the free strategy session or the apply to work with us hard call to action, hard expectation set. You could be somewhere in the middle. And so what does that look like? I'm gonna give you a very good example. Rich and I started working with this one offer, and did like an audit, fully understood exactly what's going on. And we had a conversation and we said, you know what would actually make a lot of sense here? And that would be a free strategy session. And if you've watched our content before, you're probably sitting there thinking, oh, this guy's a hypocrite, right? He says, don't do a free strategy session, and he's doing a free strategy session. Why is that? And the answer here is because it's nuanced, right? So what you have to understand is the situation that we're working with, right? And understand the full picture, understand the context of why we decided to make this decision. So before we started working with this person, they have a really big audience. They have a very different offer that I've never seen or heard of. I didn't really know this was like a niche until we started doing this. And so they have a very big audience, and people are basically begging to sign up. And the problem is like, it was a founder taking the sales calls. They didn't really like taking sales calls, and so they would very rarely actually do calls. What they did is they basically just had a buy now button on the landing page. And so people in her audience knew she was selling them an offer. They knew the price. They could go on the website. They can understand exactly what it is, but it's like this strict, hey, buy now, sign up, you can join the program. And what they were basically optimizing for is to not have to take sales calls, but still make a good amount of money, you know? But on the flip side of that is you still lose a lot of people who are just not going to want to press buy now for a couple $1,000s. So there's basically two offers. One was like 500, one was 2,500. And for a lot of these people too, it's kind of like a biz op in the sense of like it's a new opportunity, and so it's a fairly unsophisticated market. These people have probably never just clicked buy now for $500. They've certainly probably never clicked buy now for $2,500, and so there's a lot of friction there. And so what we were doing is the funnel set up. Hey, they're educated. They know there's an offer. They want the offer. They're familiar with different, you know, key features of the different offers. They just kind of like don't really know which one's for them, right? Because they can read through this, but they're a little nervous to click $2,500 if maybe they should buy the $500 one, and vice versa. And so literally what we did is like we just had one call to action, and we were deciding what to do. Do you want to have an application call? Or do you want to have a free strategy session? And the reason I thought an application call wouldn't make sense in this scenario is because I didn't want them to think that they were applying for one specific offer. So the free strategy session in the sense is like, hey, we have a couple different ways to go about this. Book a strategy session in with our team. They'll understand your situation and recommend the best approach for you. And so it's like, it's kind of on the free strategy session side of things. That's like the word of it, but the funnel is very much so they know there's an offer, they know they're being sold to, and the intent of that call is to sign up with the best approach. And so it's like kind of somewhere in the middle, like it's nuanced, right? It's in a gray area. It's not black, it's not white. It's somewhere in the middle. You have to understand what you're optimizing for. Might we change that to an application call in the future after we listen to a couple calls and tweak a few things? Maybe, But as of right now, I think it's a good place to start. And, I'll report back on how this goes, but I think it's a pretty good place to start. And so a really good example of like this continuum idea is the qualifications before the call. And so you can have a Calendly form that has a name, an email, and a phone number. There's low friction. People just book, takes them 5 seconds. You might get a lot of bookings, but they might not be the best quality of bookings. So on the other side of this continuum, you have a 10-question quiz plus qualification questions. That's a lot of friction to go through. There's really no right or wrong way to go about it. It just depends what you're optimizing for. Again, if you just want to speak with people who are like borderline laydowns, you're busy, you don't want to deal with people who are asking tons of questions, maybe unqualified, this would be the right approach. But if you just want to, maybe you have a commission-only sales team set up, you just want them to speak with anyone and you're going to sell it to anyone who has the money, maybe it's best to just book it up with the least amount of friction possible. And what's important to understand about a continuum is like, this is name, email, phone number. This is 10-question quiz plus hard qualifications, but you could do something like have 2 questions and it's maybe like closer to here, you know what I mean? Or right in the middle is just name, email, phone number. And then like 1 question saying, hey, do you have X amount of money saved up, ready to invest? If not, don't book the call. That's kind of in the middle, cause you get their information, you get the booking, but there's not a ton of friction. But at the end of the day, if you have like a lot of specific points that you need someone to qualify for, you really just don't get to ask that many questions. And so for a lot of like, we'll say agency offers that are going after very like specific niche demographic of you need X, you need Y, and you need Z criteria before we can even work with you, maybe you can put that all on the booking. And then you're kind of closer to this side where it's like hard qualifications, it's difficult to get the booking. And so if you're optimizing for this, you have a very specific avatar that you're trying to hit. You need them to meet X, Y, and Z criteria. And if not, no sense in the booking, you're probably going to get a lower quantity of leads, but a higher quality of them. And so if you're doing this, you can't complain of like, oh, we're only getting a couple bookings a week. Well, yeah, bro, it's probably because you have a ton of friction, but the people who book are typically qualified. So next we have the continuum of education and value to a decision. And so I actually see this a lot. I was going through a couple funnels lately on kind of like agency scaling offers and like a growth partner, if that's the word you want to use. And a lot of them will do this like, hey, just book a call with us. We're going to understand where your business is at, and we're going to show you exactly how we get you to the next step. And what they'll say is, even if you don't decide to work with us, like this is by far going to be the best hour of your time that you'll spend in your business all year. So the expectation that you're going to set is that they're going to book this call and that you're really going to go in depth. You're going to strategize with them and you're going to show them and tell them all the stuff that they can improve on their own. That's great. And you're going to incentivize people to book calls, but it might be tough to get a decision just because the expectation isn't necessarily aligned for a hard decision. And so on the opposite end of this continuum, you have a dynamic that sets you up for a decision. This is where you see that, hey, I'm just looking for a yes or no here. Basically, no matter what you are trying to do on that call, the outcome is to filter to a decision, whether that is a yes, let's get started, or a no, not for me. And so the way you would go about that is very differently. Again, we'll say, apply to work with us on this call. If it's a good fit, we'll get you started as soon as possible. If you're not ready, don't book. You have different continuums that you're managing. No right or wrong way to go about it, just depends what you're optimizing for. If you have, and this is like a big problem too, is a lot of times people will say, get on this call, we'll strategize with you, we'll make it so valuable and so impactful, but they just have like some random commission-only sales rep that doesn't know anything about the niche, anything about the industry. And so they'll just ask them like a handful of NEPQ questions and try to hard close them. I've seen this time and time again where like people will like send me calls to review and it's like they're asking, like I'll tell this to the closer. I'm like, you realize like the prospect's asking you a ton of technical questions. They're like, yeah. Do you realize it's because in the funnel it says book this call, we'll go into your ads manager, we'll like show you exactly what to do, we'll be super valuable, we'll help you out and all this other stuff. But you don't know any of that. From the prospect perspective, it's education, it's value. I'm gonna get on this call and they're gonna strategize with me. But they're building a commission-only sales team. They're like, all right, discovery questions, then pitch them, then hard close them and handle their objections. And so that the sales guy is optimizing for a decision. Wildly misaligned expectations here. You just have to understand from a business perspective what specifically you are optimizing for. If you're actually serious about this could work. That's great. Like there's nothing wrong with this. If you get someone who's like an absolute savage, say it's like scaling an agency, and you get someone who used to run an agency, you get them on these calls, they're actually giving value, they're educating people, and they're like strategizing with them. That dynamic can work a lot, right? Because then the prospect gets in the call and they're like, yo, this guy's actually savage. This guy knows tons of stuff about agency. Like I want to work with him. Because that sales rep's going to build that trust. They're going to build that respect. and they're more inclined to work with you. But if you have that dynamic of like, get on the call, we'll strategize with you, we'll educate you, and it's some idiot who's never ran an agency before, you're not optimizing for the right thing. You know, you have to understand where you're at in this continuum. So next, this is a good one. Gatekeeping price versus price in the ad, on the form, pre-call, front loaded on the call as well. People ask me about this all the time. Because I'm like, a lot of the offers that we're running now will say the price in the ad, say if you don't have at least $30,000, if you don't have at least $50,000, you know, don't book the call. We'll say, oh, for investors who have X amount of capital, listen up, right? On the form, it's, hey, if you don't have this amount of money, don't book the call. Or do you confirm that you have X amount ready to invest if all aligned? We're very direct about it. And then on the call too, I'll like sometimes confirm. That's like one of the first things I cover. I'm like, all right, cool. So just to jump into pricing real quick, we're looking at X plus Y, and then your estimated return is Z. Is that all aligned with you? Okay, cool. Then we get in the details, because typically, again, not to get in the nitty gritty, people need like $50,000 to $100,000 to do what we're doing. And so if they don't have that, it's not worth the time. On the flip side, if you sell something like a biz op, where maybe if you did front load the price, it would scare people away. You can't do that. You can't put in the landing page, hey, it's $5,000 if people have never spent $5,000 in their entire life, because while it is annoying, there is some degree of like needing to build the value and to get people on the call to do that. But if you don't even hint at anything, you don't say, hey, typically recommend having X to Y saved up, ready to invest, people have no idea. You can get people on who are dead broke. And this is this far end of the continuum. And well, it's like, okay, you're selling like some biz op, you're selling some coaching program. It's like, okay, well, you know, if we gatekeep price entirely, we get tons of unqualified leads. But if we say the price in the ad, the form, and pre-call, like it just scares people away, and we don't ever end up pitching anyone. Those are two ends of the spectrum. So you got to land somewhere in the middle. And so what I think is a great position for, again, in this example, someone who's selling a biz op and the price would scare people away, is just like setting some sort of expectation. Saying something like on the pre-call form or on the VSL, saying like, this is a great opportunity for people who have at least $2,000 ready to invest. Or on the pre-call form saying, most of our best students have at least, you know, $2,000 to $5,000 saved up ready to invest. Well, aligned with that be a manageable number for you. You know, it's like you're kind of hinting at it. You're giving a bit of a range, being maybe a little bit vague, but you're still setting proper expectations that if someone books the call after seeing that, they're typically going to be more qualified and a little bit more educated, and that's a higher intent booking than just entirely gatekeeping price altogether. And I give an example, I'd say this all the time, is when I first started selling a biz op, I had a ton of people. I'd like pitch it. It was like a 4K offer. I'd be like, all right, it's $4,000. They'd be like, whoa, what? I thought it was just a couple $100. And I had a lot of people say that verbatim to me. I thought it was just a couple $100. And I was like, why is that? And I realized in the new VSL we had launched, the guy completely gatekeep price, didn't say anything, didn't set any expectation at all. And he said, all you need to get started is a couple $100. And that's what set the expectation. And that's what was in people's heads. And they're thinking, oh, I have a couple $100. They have $300 to their name. I'm selling something that's $4,000. Expectations are wildly misaligned here. And so somewhere in this continuum, you find that, hey, in order to book this call, we typically recommend having between, you know, $2,000 to $5,000 saved up ready to invest. Follow line with that be manageable for you. Yes, if great, cool. You kind of hit the price a little bit. You mentioned it, but you didn't entirely gatekeep it. You're somewhere in the middle. You're not at one end of the extreme. So this is a good one too. Close everyone with money on one end of the spectrum, or you're only closing the right fit or at a minimum investment. And I'll give a really good example of this. So we used to run this PR offer. And for a while in the beginning, it's like, all right, close people make money, right? We had these $100,000 packages, and I could pretty much downsell to an individual article for $1,000. And what we were optimizing for is when people get on the call, sell them something to make money, which is cool. I'm a commission on a sales rep, right? If someone has a couple $1,000 to their name, I could still sell them something and make a little bit of money, you know? And that's okay. But the downside of that is it kind of bottlenecks fulfillment and operations. If you have clients that are paying you $100,000, but you're like ours or PR managers, they're also kind of tied up with people that are paying the company $1,000. It doesn't really make sense. And so what we ended up doing is kind of going to the opposite end of the continuum, saying we're not going to close anyone if they can't afford a minimum of a $5,000 a month retainer. And so it is what it is. There's no right and there's no wrong. It just depends what you're optimizing for. Are you in this season of just trying to stack cash, close as many people as possible? Or are you trying to say, hey, this is the archetype of people that we want. And if it's not them, it's not worth their time. If they can't pay us $5,000, we don't want them. There's pros and cons to each. In this example, you can put a ton of leads on the calendar. Doesn't really matter where they at in terms of qualifications. As long as they can afford $1,000, we can sell them something. But if you still have the same high quantity of leads that are not very qualified and you're only closing people at a minimum of 5,000, like that doesn't really make sense because you're kind of sifting through the ashes all day, not being able to sell anyone anything, and you can only sell at a minimum of $5,000. So there's pros and cons. It's probably easier from a business standpoint to scale. Operations are cleaner. You're only getting qualified people in the operation and the fulfillment, and your time is being spent with people that are paying you good money. But if everything else is misaligned, like ads kind of suck, you're not really setting proper expectations. Maybe you don't have good enough results to be selling at $5,000 a month. Like there's a lot of different things that go into this decision. And that's kind of why, again, it's a continuum to manage and not just some hard right or wrong. Hope that makes sense. Here's a good one too. A one-off payment, say $1,000 or a minimum 6-month commitment. Again, there's pros and cons, kind of the same idea of from an operational standpoint and say, maybe for like some ads agency, be like, we need at least 3 to 6 months in order to get proven results. Well, you're obviously going to lose people who are just like not willing to do that. But from your standpoint, it's like, you know what? Maybe it's not worth their time unless they're unwilling to sign up for a 6-month commitment. And so if you're on this end of the continuum, pros and cons to it, right? You get clients who are serious, you get clients that are paying you money. They're more committed. Typically, they're probably better quality of clients, but you're going to lose out on a lot of deals if you're not willing to do like little one-offs or 3 months or 4 months or maybe 6 months with like an opt-out or something along those lines. And so to give another example of this as well, like from the PR standpoint, we did the same thing for a little bit. If I'm on the sales calls, I knew that if I didn't make people sign up for a 6-month commitment, I can close way more deals. Maybe it was just a one-off 10K. Not bad. Maybe it's 3 months. Maybe it's, 6 months with the ability to opt out if they're unhappy with it at any time. This is good for sales. This is good for volume. This is good for getting people in the door. And if you can deliver a great product, they're more inclined to stay. From a sales standpoint, it's way easier to close a one-off than it is a 6-month commitment. But from a business standpoint, you probably only want to deal with the clients that are dead serious about this and that are willing to stay on for a 6-month commitment, But what you also have to understand is that you can't be like yelling at your salespeople for like not closing every single person when you have a very like small box of people that you're willing to accept, right? Like they have to be the right fit. They have to meet X, Y, and Z criteria, and they have to be willing to sign up for a 6-month commitment. That's okay. If that's the way you want to run your agency, that's totally fine. There's no right or wrong way to go about it. But you also cannot be operating at this end of the continuum and then be mad when you're not closing every single person who can't afford you and you're not closing every single person who doesn't want a 6-month commitment. You have to understand what you're optimizing for and run your business accordingly. If you're optimizing for rock solid clients, you only want a handful of them that you can make money with and be long-term partners, that's great, but don't expect to be slinging deals left and right on tons of criteria and 6-month commitments. So that's the last one I wanted to go over. I hope this kind of clarified things. I think at the end of the day, you understand that from a sales process standpoint, there is a lot of nuance. There's really no right or wrong way to go about it. It really just depends what you were optimizing for. What is like the way we want to go about this? Is it more focused on quantity? Is it more focused on quality? Do we want to add friction? Do we want to remove it? Do we want to close everyone with money? Do we want to close people who are the right fit? Understand what you want, and then you're able to reverse engineer every single step of the process, from the ad, from the funnel to the sales call to who you close. Then all makes sense once you have this end goal in mind of what you're optimizing for. Hope that was helpful. As always, if you want something like this in your business or just want to understand like a better approach to take and have everything continuous, aligned from sales to marketing to closing deals to scaling fulfillment, go to closeandpay.com. We'll help you out. Cheers, guys.